Hey peeps! Back in late 2020, I posted a video about the evidence of Doug possibly being on the autism spectrum by showing clips of the TV series. Unfortunately, that video was removed by YouTube due to Mattel's copyright claim. Luckily, a video was made 7 months after the first, showing traits of Doug's autism that are only displayed in the Relay series, and it's still up and running. However, both videos do have flaws that I will address later. People were more interested in me explaining rather than just showing. In case you didn't know, I do have autism myself. Since autism is a spectrum, I ended up getting help from other autistic people on a Discord page that I created for this video. Anyhow, I will start this theory. Doug introduces himself to Sir Topham Hatt. He tells him that his name is Montague, but prefers to be called, well, Duck. But then he explains that the other engines from his old relay say that he waddles, even though he doesn't. What does that have to do with autism? Doug has done over-explain, as he probably thinks his new controller would be confused about why he likes his nickname more, and even more if he tells him the reason. Once Doug learned that the bigger engines had been controlling his new friend Percy, he immediately thought of teaching them a lesson by blocking the sheds and turntable. This shows impulsiveness, as Doug probably didn't believe the disturbance he would cause. Black and white thinking, as he seemingly only sees Goran, James, and Henry as bullies. Lack of cognitive empathy, as he didn't realize that using the sheds is a right for all engines. What I find interesting is how in the original book, Doug had a serious look, while in the TV adaptation, he was smiling until Topham scolded him and Percy. While it's likely that an angry face wasn't created for him at the time, it could indicate that Doug might also struggle with emotional empathy, which we'll get to later. A few years later, the city's churro was visiting Sodor, and Doug felt shy at first when his driver offered to give him a talk. In my Relay series exclusive video, I said it has to do with Doug's struggles with social skills, but the encounter told me that it's more likely that him being a fanboy, which I agree now. Anyhow, when Goran's criticizing Churro due to jealousy by saying he's improper for not having a dome, Doug has become quite upset, as some autistic people tend to struggle when it comes to handling opinions. Once Eric told him that Goran's trying to be like Churro, he blurted out, "I think he shall knock himself to bits," which is pretty violent for him to say. Not long after the events, a diesel engine named Diesel came to Sodor for a trial. Topham tells Doug that he needs to teach him about these surroundings. Once they arrived at the yard, Doug was irritated with Diesel as they were heading. He yelled, "The fat controller to you," after he was about to say Sir Topham Hatt. He went to a boiling point when Diesel told him that diesels are revolutionary and didn't need to learn. This made Doug angrily tell him to collect trucks on his own. Again, this shows impulsiveness, but also his short temper. Another thing about this is how he said "a thing and gummy," as he probably has trouble pronouncing certain words. When he saw Diesel struggling to pull the old trucks, he just stayed put and laughed. He might not realize the stress and frustration he has caused for Diesel and the destruction of the yard and trucks. Due to this, Diesel has spread lies about Doug coming out with bad nicknames for the bigger engines to the troublesome trucks. Later, Doug decides to take a rest in the sheds, but he is blocked and accused. I could tell his anxiety was building up, as at first, he was yelling at them. Being tired from hard work probably didn't help. Then, when Topham came over to assess the situation, and the other engines told him their claims, Doug appeared to be shaken. After Topham told him that he would be sent to Wellsworth, he burst into tears. Someone on Facebook Messenger told me that shows that Doug appears to be more sensitive than the other characters. If they were accused, they would just be sad or annoyed. Another person, but this time from Discord, tells me that Doug probably had a meltdown while he was chuffing. While it may not be shown on screen, I could see that. Once Doug meets up with Edward, he tells him how Diesel has spread lies about him, and makes the other engines and Topham think he's horrid. Again, this shows black and white thinking. Luckily, Edward reassures him. In my older video, I was showing Doug coming while doing his work as a form of verbal stimming. Now, I realize this is common for some older European men. Another thing from that video is how Doug reacted to the barber putting shaving cream on his face as evidence of sensory issues. The issue behind this is how he was doing it very roughly, and anyone would have reacted like Doug did. An important thing to mention is that Doug's catchphrase is, "There are two ways of doing things, the Great Western Way and the wrong way." While some people think it's him being arrogant or patriotic, I see it as repetitive language. As time went by, Doug learned about the miniature engines in Arlesdale, and he became fixated. Once he arrives, meets them, and sees the functions, he appears to be uncomfortable, especially when he hears the chute. This is common for autistics when they are in unfamiliar situations. After one of them shows him their coaches, he almost blurted out "but they're trucks" by accident before changing it to "they're not like ours." Despite all of this, he has become friends with them. Later, Doug was going through a big fixation with the regatta and sailing. Yes, I see all at sea as a prequel to Donald's Duck. Anyhow, Doug talks about it to Percy nonstop, as he probably doesn't realize that he's annoying him. Some autistic people can talk about their fixations or special interests a lot. This was getting to a point where Doug wanted to sail instead of being stuck on the rails until he had helped a man get to the hospital. Now, this isn't the only time when Doug has a fixation, as is shown in the magazine stories, mainly with things that had to do with the ocean. Someone from Discord told me that some autistic people tend to feel woven by water. Anyway, and sometime after, Topham gave Doug a branch line. Since he was feeling very excited and proud, he could not stop talking about it to Donald, as he probably didn't realize that he needed sleep. As Doug saw Henry complaining about the Flying Scotsman getting to have two tenders, he came up with a trick to teach him a lesson. How? By getting him 6 old ones filled with sludge. Doug probably didn't think this through and might not realize it could cause problems for Henry's boiler. When Oliver just started work in the Little Western, he became overly confident after Gordon told him that he was sagacious, whereas Doug calls him good gracious as a response, as he probably didn't know how to pronounce that word. After Oliver falls into the turntable well, Doug makes a snarky comment as he's more focused on the delayed he has caused rather than giving him empathy. Luckily, he felt sympathetic towards him once he saw him being taken for repairs at night. While Doug was waiting at the station, a double-decker bus named Bulgy told him that he wanted the rails to be ripped up. This angers him and tells him that he has a friend named Birdie, who's a buzz, as he does tease about the railway at times, but never wants it to be ripped up. As it shows, Doug gives out too much information. When Doug is slowly chuffing through the bridge Bulgy collided, he nervously tells him that a brick might fall on him. He bluntly replies by saying that would serve him right for telling lies. Doug might have a sign of having sensitivity to strong smells after he crashed into a flying kipper. As for most of the engines, they look like they are disgusted, while Doug appears to be shaken. Anyways, after Thomas teases Percy for fearing the ghost engine that he heard from Edward's story, Doug wants to teach him a lesson by asking one of the workers if he's willing to let Thomas stay in the smelters. Despite him showing an intense amount of terror and Percy telling Doug he was only goofing around, Doug shows no compassion towards him. What I find to be ironic is how he is shown to have strong, compassionate empathy in a lot of magazine stories. In Doug's first major CGI episode, Topham asks him and Thomas to take Harold to the Search and Rescue Center for repairs. Doug is willing to do the job, while Thomas wants to tour around Solar for Harold. He tells them that there are two ways of doing things, the Great Western Way and the wrong way, as the Great Western Way is that they need to go directly and promptly to the Solar Search and Rescue Center without dilly-dallying, as he pretty much said that twice. In an online review, the author mentions that Doug needs a thesaurus, and I agree. Anyhow, the more Thomas tries to persuade Doug, the more frustrated he appears to be. It probably made him not think straight since he believed in Thomas when he told him that they needed to collect engineers in Natford. Unfortunately, this has caused a breaking point for Doug after Goran almost crashes into them and learns that Thomas tricked him. All the stress that Thomas caused led him to have emotional dysregulation. He was feeling very intense and angry, along with having rigid thoughts and impulsiveness. This made him, Thomas, and Harold go through the narrow tunnel and get stuck, even though Thomas told him to stop. I thought Doug was having a meltdown for a long time, until recently I found out he was having emotional dysregulation. While they were waiting, Doug was calming down as he appeared to feel guilty and looked like he was about to cry. Luckily, Doug apologized to Thomas for his behavior and accepted his route. They were able to arrive on time. For this episode, Doug has said the Great Western Way 5 times. I hate how the official media treats Doug like he's the bad guy in this episode. Moving forward, as James came by to rescue Doug from the water, he yelled and complained about the coldness and wetness. What's interesting is that when Percy was in even deeper water, he wasn't nearly as bothered by it. So it indicates that Doug could be sensitive to touch and temperature. However, it isn't just from being cold. As in the magazine story, he kept sweating, panting, and breathing heavily due to a hole in his boiler. When Goran had the same problem, he didn't have the same effect. Anyhow, James tries to cheer up Doug by saying to keep his steam in, which means to turn his attitude around. although Doug took it too literally and replied that he doesn't have any. In another magazine story, local sailors dressed up as pirates came to his branch line as he thought they were real pirates. Keep in mind that this was before the series was controlled by Hit Entertainment. Onwards, Doug was telling the other engines about the time they pulled slip coaches. James finds him to be annoying, implying that he tells his Great Western stories a lot, which is hypocritical of him, since he brags about his red paint all the time. As Doug found out James plagiarized his story and took his old slip coaches, he understandably became upset. Now, when our engines have similar situations, they tend to feel irritated. Meanwhile, Doug seems to be in distress and appears to be quite worried after James makes the slip coaches to collide with each other. Thankfully, Topham has learned about the truth and let Doug use them. What's amazing about this is how he can pull and use them at ease, despite the last time he had done that was decades ago. This indicates that he is great with memory and quite intelligent. Also, someone on Discord told me that if this wasn't resolved, Doug would have struggled to let it go and hold a grudge until Edward helps him out. Anyhow, and on the Little Western, Doug was irritated by Toad's loud, high-pitched singing, even after Oliver said that what he does when he's in a good mood. Doug still yells at him by telling him to be quieter. This shows that Doug doesn't like certain noises. Oliver was annoyed as well, but seemed to be way more bothered by it. When Skiff wanted to help prepare for the big storm, Oliver told him that he and Doug were bigger and stronger than him. To add salt to the wound, Doug says that they're not little railboats. As Skiff leaves, Doug calls him a little railboat again. As has been seen before, this shows how blunt Doug is. During the storm, Doug was struggling to see in the heavy rain as he was squinting his eyes, while Oliver doesn't have the same problem. This could be a sensory problem for Doug, but it may also be an eyesight problem for him, which does happen to some autistic people. In a magazine story, Doug called the water rescue team, whom he mistaken a seal for a person. When Doug overheard Daisy saying about taking the kids to school, he blurted out, "That sounds like a fun job." Some autistic adults enjoy spending time with children. Once Daisy forced Thomas to do a job, despite him being busy with his branch line, Doug excitedly offered to do it instead without thinking first. This shows his hyper-compassionate empathy, but also his impulsiveness. Speaking of impulsiveness, once he saw Hannah on a sighting, he immediately collected her without giving a second thought, which made Toby chase after him to get her back. After trying to find a spare coach, he found an abandoned one named Dexter. Unfortunately, he could not pull him and told him that he needed to find a coach whom he could pull, as this was him being too honest. However, he did feel guilty for leaving him. The moment that he heard Daisy mention how the school would take months to repair, he remembered how Reg told him about repair, recycle, and reuse. So he fetched Judy and Jerome so he could bring Dexter and make him useful again by turning him into a temporary classroom. This is another time in the same episode where Doug shows compassionate empathy. That's all the major things I would say about my duck is autistic theory. However, there is one important note. In the CGI series, Duck speaks in a sing-song voice as his pitch, tone, volume, and accent are inconsistent, even when he's in the same situation or speaking the same sentence. Of course, none of the other characters have the same problem. He also tends to speak directly. Yes, the other characters did so in the model series. However, Doug still does in the CGI series. Now, let's get into the metaphors. When Wilbur Audrey first bought the 57XS Pannier model, it was waddling as it moved, and its children call it Duck. Some autistic people do walk differently. There's an episode where Duck's whistle was producing fart sounds because its driver boiled an egg on it. Now, gastrointestinal issues do happen to some autistic people. To those who are starting to have second thoughts, I'll tell you about autistic characters who remind me of him. The first I'll mention is Carl Cloud from Arthur. Now, like Duck is very blunt but also has fixations, most notably about trains, and we talk about them a lot without realizing it. Like George when it comes to the regatta and his great Western stories. When George tells Carl that he is pulling his leg, he takes it too literally, a lot like when James told Duck a metaphor. The second character I'll talk about is another Carl, but this time he is from Carl the Collector. He is a lot like Duck and the other Carl, but he fixates on collecting things. However, like Duck, he is a black and white thinker, has trouble letting things go, and is short-tempered. Now what about Bruno? In a lot of ways, they are different due to autism being a spectrum disorder, yet they have quite a few common traits. They're both blunt, impulsive, and black and white thinkers, along with having fixations and repetitive language, though they are displayed differently. As Bruno will say schedules and routines out loud as a form of stimming, they also tend to feel uncomfortable while in an unusual situation. Now, does Duck remind me of myself? In some ways, yes. I do sometimes talk too much when it comes to my fixations and feeling energetic. I will have outbursts when I'm feeling agitated or when my anxiety builds up. I do sometimes cry when I'm feeling overwhelmed. I tend to over-explain things at times. I did have trouble letting things go, but I'm getting better at it. I will get irritated when I'm in a noisy environment, especially when I know I must do important work. Finally, I have impulsiveness, but I'm doing a better job at controlling it compared to before. What inspired me to do this? Even as a kid, I knew there was something different about Duck, other than his unique shape, and I felt connected to him, but I couldn't understand why. Then, when I was about 14, something clicked as I started to think he was on the autism spectrum. Now, I did not fully understand what the disability was, so despite knowing I have it since I was 8, after my parents explained it to me. Luckily, I learned more about it as I got older, as I keep trying to find videos, articles, and posts that talk about Duck's autism, but I couldn't find any. At the age of 18, I was like, oh, what the heck, I'll do it myself. It all started with simple little Instagram posts. Before I wrapped up this video, I'll tell you why Duck is special to me when it comes to autism representation. Despite having a lot of traits, They aren't obvious unless they are dug deeper. Since he isn't intended to be autistic, he is treated like a character rather than a awareness tool. Finally, most autistic headcanons have around 5 symptoms, but Duck, on the other hand, has around 30. I wish the autism community outside of the Thomas fandom would have acknowledged that. Oh well. Anyway, that's the end of my video, and tell me about your thoughts in the comments.